So picture this. You're driving like 70 miles an hour down the highway,
Okay.
and suddenly you spot danger ahead, right? So you instinctively slam your foot down on the emergency brakes.
Pure panic mode.
Exactly. But your car doesn't instantly stop. It just, keeps sliding forward.
Oh, the worst feeling.
The tires are screaming against the pavement. The smell of burning rubber fills the cabin. And you get that terrifying, stomach-dropping realization that you are completely out of control.
Right, because the physical world insists on maintaining its state of motion, regardless of what you, the driver, actually want to happen.
It's terrifying, right. Now, what if I told you your brain is doing that exact same thing right now? And it might actually be actively ruining your life.
That feeling of utter helplessness, while the physical laws of the universe just kind of drag you toward a collision,
Yeah.
it's an incredibly visceral image.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's not just a physical phenomenon. That momentum exists in our minds, too.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a translated essay by a writer named Feng titled The Harm of Thought Inertia.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. And our mission today is to figure out why this mental rigidity, this inability to stop our mental momentum, is essentially a hidden killer in today's rapidly evolving world.
Yeah, we're going to help you, the listener, figure out exactly where your own mental brakes might be failing.
Now, okay, let's unpack this, because right up front, I really need to make a very clear neutrality disclaimer to you listening.
Definitely necessary for this one.
Yeah, to illustrate these points, the source material uses some highly specific and, very politically charged historical examples.
Right.
So we're not taking sides here. We are not endorsing the author's political viewpoints, whether they lean left, right, or center. We are simply analyzing this text impartially to understand the underlying theory of cognitive adaptation that's being proposed.
That is a crucial distinction to set the stage. I mean, our goal here is to look at the big picture mechanics.
Right, the how and the why.
Exactly. We want to understand the psychological mechanisms of why human consciousness instinctively clings to the familiar. And, more importantly, we need to examine why this completely natural instinct can become an absolute stumbling block for civilization as a whole.
So to truly understand how this thought inertia impacts society, we really have to start with how the essay translates a literal law of physics into a psychological phenomenon.
Yeah, we're talking about Isaac Newton 101 here.
Exactly.
The text starts precisely with the textbook definition of inertia. In physics, inertia is the property of an object to maintain its state of constant motion, or rest, unless it is acted upon by an external force.
An object at rest wants to stay at rest.
Right, and an object in motion wants to keep moving in the exact same direction at the exact same speed.
But then the text draws this direct one-to-one parallel to the human mind. Human thought, the argument goes, has the exact same nature.
It instinctively works to sustain its existing state of consciousness.
Right. It wants to stay at rest, or it wants to keep moving in the exact same ideological direction it always has been moving. Which, brings us right back to that car analogy.
Yep, the brake's failing.
When the world demands that you stop and change direction, but your mind is moving at 70 miles an hour in the old direction, well, you get a catastrophic slide.
Your thoughts cling tightly to outdated ideas.
And they instinctively reject the emergence of new paradigms. It's like mental muscle memory that suddenly becomes a massive liability when the rules of the game fundamentally change.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about it. Imagine you've spent 10 years practicing this heavy, powerful tennis swing.
Okay.
Your muscles know exactly what to do. You don't even have to think about it. But suddenly, without warning, you are thrust into a ping pong tournament.
Oh, man. You're going to destroy the table.
Right. If you take a massive tennis swing at a tiny ping pong ball, you're going to lose the point. You're going to look utterly ridiculous, and you'll probably break the paddle.
The environment changed, but your momentum didn't.
Exactly. But I have to ask, isn't a certain amount of mental inertia just a natural biological survival mechanism? I mean, why does this essay view it as a literal killer?
What's fascinating here is how the context of the environment completely dictates the value of that instinct.
How so?
Well, if we think about how the human brain evolved, cognitive inertia was an incredible advantage. In a static world, a world that looks exactly the same today as it did 100 years ago, mental inertia is incredibly safe.
Because things aren't changing.
Right. If your grandfather's trade is your trade, and the village you were born in is the village you die in, it's highly efficient. Your brain doesn't want to expend massive amounts of caloric energy relearning how to survive every single day.
Oh, I see. Like if you know a certain berry won't poison you, you just keep eating that berry. You just run the old reliable software because it works.
Precisely. You automate your worldview.
But
But the core premise while exploring is that we no longer live in a static world.
not even close.
No. We live in a world of exponential, rapid, unrelenting change. So the inability to shift your consciousness in a timely manner transforms from a safe survival mechanism into a deeply destructive force.
It becomes a liability.
Exactly. It causes profound personal mental anguish because your internal map no longer matches the external territory. And on a macro level, it stalls the progress of civilization. It turns from a biological shield into an evolutionary stumbling block.
Okay, so we've established the physics of the mind, but what's really striking is that the text doesn't stay abstract for very long, right?
No, it dives right into history.
It moves right onto the grand stage of history. It looks at what happens during massive cultural shocks and how they create these incredibly stark divisions between those who adapt and those who resist.
Yes, and this is where we get into those historical case studies to really examine the high cost of cognitive rigidity.
Right, the real-world friction.
It's about looking at how the friction of transition actually feels to the people living through it. For example, the text looks back over 20 years ago at Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms.
Okay, yeah. The essay brings up that famous policy instruction to, quote, let some people get rich first.
Right.
It also references the pragmatic philosophy that it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white. As long as it catches mice, it's a good cat. The instruction to the entire nation was basically to stop entangling themselves in ideological debates over socialism versus capitalism.
And just focus all their efforts on economic development.
Exactly.
Now think about the profound psychological whiplash of that moment. You have an entire population that for decades had been deeply steeped in communal living.
Everything was shared.
Everything. Their entire moral compass, their daily habits, their societal value was built around the concept of common prosperity. The pursuit of individual wealth wasn't just, discouraged. It was viewed as a moral failing.
So it's not just a minor policy change. It's a direct attack on their fundamental understanding of right and wrong.
Exactly. And that is where the thought inertia is strongest. The text argues that many people were entirely shackled by this inertia.
Because you can't just undo decades of programming overnight.
Right. When told to shift gears and embrace a market economy, they couldn't just flip a switch in their brains. The friction was immense.
I can imagine.
Because of that deeply ingrained inertia, these individuals resisted the new economic reality, both verbally and psychologically. They couldn't play the new game because their minds were still perfectly calibrated for the old one.
And the outcomes the text describes are pretty stark.
Very stark.
It argues that as the tides of history surged forward, those who managed to adapt their thinking quickly, well, they emerged as the leaders in this new market economy.
Yeah.
They thrived.
They rode the wave.
Yeah. The essay notes that these adapters didn't just become prosperous financially, they elevated their overall cultural literacy and began to excel in multiple fields.
Well, what about the ones who couldn't hit the brakes?
Right. For those who couldn't stop their old worldview, the text says they became psychologically unbalanced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had to sit there and watch as more and more people around them grew wealthy under the new rules. And because they couldn't adapt, this led to deep bitterness, constant complaining, or, and this is the ironic part, out of a desperate, panicked pursuit of money, they started engaging in corruption.
Throwing away the very morals they were trying to protect.
Exactly. Basically throwing away their actual morals just to drill into what the text calls the money hole.
It's a tragic illustration of how a rigid mindset creates its own suffering. And we see a similar dynamic in the text's interpretation of another highly charged moment, the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests.
Right. Another huge historical shock.
Again, purely through the lens of mental inertia, the text looks at how individuals handled the aftermath of a massive political shock. It argues that a large portion of the students involved quickly adapted their thinking afterward.
Like, they realized the game had changed.
Yes. When the political winds definitively shifted, they redirected their massive energy and intellect into other areas of life, like business or academia.
But then the text points out a fraction of students who possessed what it calls strong thought inertia.
The resistors.
Yeah, these were the ones who just couldn't redirect that energy. According to the essay, they remained stuck in an ideological loop, wasting over a decade of their youth in struggles that had frankly, already been decided by the larger historical
It
forces.
says their thinking became utterly rigid,
Exactly, unable to tolerate any dissent. The essay states that they were simply left behind by the times, stubbornly clinging to their belief.
which leads to the final macro example in the text, the banning of the Falun Gong movement in mainland China.
Another really intense example.
It is. The text claims that in the face of this overwhelming external pressure, some practitioners quickly adjusted their thinking. They abandoned the practice, distanced themselves from the organization, and found new, quieter ways to explore spirituality while maintaining balance in their family and work lives.
While others, according to the text, were totally paralyzed by deep-seated thought inertia.
Right.
The author writes a really haunting description of their foundation crumbling and their opportunities slipping away. And there's this incredible, striking metaphor used here. The text says it was like trying to hatch an egg that had already broken.
That is quite the image.
Right. Crying was futile, the egg was destroyed, yet they still sat on the nest, wasting their life force, waiting hopelessly for a broken thing to hatch.
It's a powerful image of wasted potential caused by an inability to accept a new reality.
I really have to jump in and push back here, though.
Go for it.
Because as I'm processing this, it feels dangerously tricky. How do we and how does the listener tell the difference between thought inertia and simply having the courage to stand up for your deeply held moral principles?
It's a fine line.
Isn't this essay completely conflating stubbornness with integrity? Like, if you believe in a cause, abandoning it just because the political or cultural winds shift against you seems like cowardice, not adaptation.
This raises an important question, and you've just hit on the absolute core of the philosophical worldview we are unpacking today.
Okay, lay it on me.
The text is not measuring these historical events by our standard metrics of moral integrity, ideological purity, or righteous defiance. The fundamental metric used here is harmony with what is called the progressive forces of the time.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the metric is literally just going with the flow of history.
Yes, but it views history as a very specific, undeniable physical force. The text essentially argues that resistance to massive external historical forces is a mathematically guaranteed path to failure.
You just can't win.
Right. When a tidal wave hits you, you either move with the water or you get crushed by the water. The water doesn't care about your moral integrity.
Wow.
The text equates rapid mental adjustment directly with survival. If you adjust your thinking in response to the changing environment, you align with the progressive force and you thrive.
And if you don't?
If you resist, if your mental brakes fail and you slide forward into the old paradigm, you become the backward force, and you are bound to be eliminated by the environment.
Man. So it is essentially adapt or die.
Pretty much.
That is incredibly pragmatic, almost ruthlessly so. It completely strips all the romanticism out of being a rebel or a martyr. You aren't a hero standing against the tide. You're just an organism failing to adapt to its ecosystem.
Exactly. It's a purely evolutionary view of human thought.
That's a lot to chew on. But what's fascinating is that this framework doesn't just apply to historical revolutions or massive societal upheavals. It scales all the way down to our living rooms.
It really does.
Because these huge historical waves are driven by the exact same thought inertia that governs our daily routines, our habits, and even our most intimate relationships.
The macro and the micro are governed by the exact same psychological law. The text shifts focus to contemporary youth and the concept of marriage. It argues that young people today are highly flexible in their thinking and adept at enjoying life, specifically because the rigid constraints of traditional worldviews and lifelong marriage concepts are diminishing for them.
And this genuinely surprised me when I read it.
Yeah.
The essay actually frames the rising divorce rate not as a societal tragedy and not as a failure of commitment, but as a sign of societal progress.
It does, because it signifies a breaking of old, rigid thought patterns. The old inertia said, you stay in this structure no matter how miserable you are, because that is what society expects.
Right, you just endure it.
But the new mindset is fluid. It adapts to the reality of the relationship. Meanwhile, the text points out the friction experienced by older generations who are stuck in traditional mindsets.
They don't get it.
They look at these changing relationship dynamics and lament that moral standards have declined. They sit around complaining that people's hearts aren't what they used to be.
So they're suffering because the world isn't behaving the way their mental inertia demands it should.
Precisely. The text suggests these people are just watching the flowers fall and adding completely unnecessary worry to their own lives. They can't stop the cultural change, so they just sit there and suffer through the friction of their own resistance.
Which brings us to the everyday, mundane contradictions driven by this inertia.
Oh, these are so relatable.
Right. The text lists out these fascinating, deeply relatable examples of lifestyle and technological stubbornness. For instance, cars have been invented, they are highly efficient and everywhere, but people still romantically reminisce about horse-drawn carriages.
It's that nostalgia trap.
Exactly. Or we have the technology to resolve complex business issues from 1,000 miles away with a quick video call, but people still insist on embarking on long, exhausting, expensive journeys just to meet face to face.
The text highlights a deep, almost irrational reluctance to embrace modern efficiency. It mentions people who insist on doing absolutely everything themselves, expending massive amounts of unnecessary effort.
When they could just ask for help.
Right. Instead of cooperating and recognizing the benefits of shared loads or new systems, it points out people who stubbornly stay put in one geographic location, buying a house and tying themselves down, instead of being mobile when their life or their career requires it.
The old American dream mindset.
Exactly. The argument is that renting can be far better than buying. Mobility is preferable to stubbornness. Change is better than rigidity. But people find letting go of the old ways incredibly difficult.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, listening right now. What is your horse-drawn carriage?
Ooh, good question.
Right. Where are you insisting on doing things the hard way just because it's the way you've always done it? Are you spending 3 hours manually compiling a spreadsheet at work that a new piece of software could do in 10 seconds?
Just because the initial learning curve of the software feels slightly uncomfortable.
Yes. That discomfort, that is your thought inertia in real time. That is the friction of your brain trying to stay at rest.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly explains the psychological comfort of the old ways. I mean, why do we prefer the hard, inefficient way?
Because it's familiar.
Because a known misery feels safer than an unknown efficiency. The old way provides a powerful illusion of control. You know the steps, you know the exact outcome, even if the outcome is exhausting.
Yeah.
The text is suggesting that achieving true, frictionless efficiency in the modern world requires abandoning the ego that says, I have to do it myself the way I've always done it. It requires trusting the new systems.
It's surrendering that white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel even when you know the car is sliding forward.
Exactly.
Now, we need to talk about where this essay ultimately goes because it takes a massive, intense turn here.
It really ramps up.
We've moved from the inconveniences of daily life and spreadsheets to the text's ultimate, most urgent warning. Because change isn't just happening, it's accelerating exponentially.
Faster than ever.
Overcoming thought inertia isn't just about being more efficient at work or accepting your neighbor's divorce anymore. According to the text, it's about literal existential survival.
Yes. The text introduces a concept it calls the impending arrival of the Lifechanyuan era.
The Lifechanyuan era, we should probably define that for the listener because it sounds intense.
It is. In the context of the author's broader philosophy, the Lifechanyuan era is proposed as a profound metaphysical and societal paradigm shift.
Okay.
It's a new era for humanity that fundamentally requires our collective consciousness to elevate to a much higher, more unified state. According to the text, the horn has already sounded for this new era.
The warning bell is ringing.
And the warning is stark. Anyone who does not harmonize with the main theme of these rapidly changing times or resonate with the ideals of this new era will face a significant risk of what the text ominously calls elimination and purification.
I mean, elimination and purification that is intensely heavy, almost apocalyptic language.
It's meant to be a wake-up call. The text explicitly warns against staying entangled in what it calls our old nests. And it specifically lists these nests.
And what are they?
They are nation, religion, political party, and family.
Wait, family, nation. So essentially everything that traditionally gives human beings a sense of identity, grounding, and community.
Everything. The text paints a very vivid picture here of an approaching tsunami. On one side, you have people who have shed these old identities, marching forward with vitality toward the highest realms of existence, happy and adaptable.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have those burdened by the heavy thought inertia of their nests. They are standing perfectly still as the tsunami rolls in, utterly confused, helpless, and speaking nonsense that even they don't understand because their conceptual framework has completely collapsed.
The ultimate truth, as laid out in the text, is summarized in this quote. Today's river is not yesterday's river, and tomorrow's earth will not be today's earth. You cannot use China's Great Wall to block the winds from the west. Old vessels cannot hold new wine.
It's incredibly poetic, but the message is brutal.
To survive this coming purification, the text says you must massively reduce your thought inertia, let go of the self, and completely abandon your ego.
Completely.
So, what does this all mean? I really have to express some healthy skepticism here because the extremity of this conclusion is a lot to process.
It's a massive leap.
The text says we have to abandon the nests of family and nation. That is a massive quantum leap from just realizing you should rent an apartment instead of buying one, or adopting new software at work.
Right, it's totally different stakes.
Is the argument genuinely saying that total detachment from everyone and everything you love is the only way to achieve mental flexibility? That sounds incredibly isolating.
It is a dramatic escalation,
Okay.
absolutely. To unpack the philosophical weight of that conclusion, we have to treat it almost as a radical thought experiment.
Okay, let's do that.
The text is pushing the concept of letting go to its absolute metaphysical limit. Why are things like nation, religion, or family considered nests? Because they inherently create boundaries. They create an us versus them mentality.
Right, you protect your own.
The underlying belief here is that identity itself, especially when it is rigidly bound to an institution or a traditional structure, acts as the ultimate, heaviest form of thought inertia.
Because if your entire identity is tied to being part of a specific nation or a specific family unit, you will naturally defend it to the death against any change.
Exactly.
Their brains simply cannot allow that structure to shift because if it does, you lose who you are.
Precisely. If who you are is entirely based on a nest that is actively being swept away by the river of time, you will inevitably drown trying to hold on to it.
So it's not about being cold-hearted.
No, the text isn't necessarily arguing for cold heartlessness or abandoning your children. Rather, it's arguing the true survival in an era of unprecedented tsunami-level change requires an identity that is entirely fluid, not fixed.
Bruce Lee style. Be water.
Exactly. If your mind is rigid like a stone building, the wave of the future breaks you. If your mind is like water, you simply become part of the wave.
Wow. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the literal physical reality of a car's brakes failing on the highway, and we slid right into the hidden everyday dangers of our own rigid minds.
From Newton to psychology.
We looked at how massive historical and cultural shocks separate the rapid adapters from the bitter resistors. We examined our mundane, daily stubbornness, clinging to our metaphorical horse-drawn carriages because the illusion of control feels safer than change.
The comfort of the known misery.
Exactly. And we finally faced this stark, radical vision of a philosophical tsunami, where abandoning our deepest identities is framed as the ultimate requirement for survival.
And the core thread connecting every single one of these points is the profound realization that our suffering, our backwardness, and our failure to thrive are often entirely the result of our own thought inertia.
We get in our own way.
The pain we feel in life is usually just the severe friction between how the world actually is and how our brains stubbornly insist it should be.
It's an incredibly challenging perspective.
It is a lot to process. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over on your own as you go about your day.
Lay it on us.
We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the harm of inertia, where old thoughts and outdated instincts drag us backward against our will.
Right.
But physics tells us that inertia works both ways. It applies to objects at rest, yes, but also to objects in motion.
Oh, interesting.
If you can do the hard, uncomfortable work to let go of the past, break out of your old nests, and actually get your mind moving in the direction of curiosity, openness, and radical adaptability.
The momentum shifts.
Exactly. Could you build a positive thought inertia? Could you create a mind that is literally unstoppable in its pursuit of the new?
A mind that doesn't just survive the tsunami, but actually learns how to surf it. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your own mental breaks. Watch out for those horse-drawn carriages in your life, and we will catch you next time.